Dedication. The Silver Princess in Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. Founded on and continuing the famous Oz stories by L. Frank Baum, the Royal Historian of Oz. Dear boys and girls, this book will tell you all that happened when Randy and Kabumpo travelled off to the castle of the Red Jinn. Halfway there, they met a princess from another planet and her thunder cult. Later, a villain named Gludwig. With a name like that, we'd know he was a villain, wouldn't we? Now do tell me what interested you most in this story. Any Oz news you have heard lately, and all about yourself. There goes the bell now. Well, I'm expecting a merry message any minute from any of you. Exciting, isn't it? So here I go to read my first letter. Yours, with last year's love and this year's wishes. Ruth Plumly Thompson. To two little girls, Florence Lynn Edsel and Mary Josephine Ritchie, this book is lovingly dedicated by their cousin Ruth. End of dedication. Chapter 1 of The Silver Princess in Oz. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Beth Thomas. The Silver Princess in Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. Chapter 1. The King Rebels. In a faraway northwestern corner of the Gillikin country of Oz lies the rugged little kingdom of Regalia. And in an airy and elegant castle set high on the tallest mountain lives Randy, its brave young king. When the Regalians are not busy celebrating one of their 77 national holidays, they are busy tending their flocks of goats or looking after the vines that cover every mountain and hill, producing the largest and most luscious grapes in Oz. These proud and independent mountain folk have much to recommend them, and if they consider themselves superior to any and all of the other natives in Oz, we must not blame them too much. Perhaps the sharp, clear air and high altitude in which they live is responsible for their top-lofty attitude. Randy, it must be confessed, found the stiff and unbending manner of his subjects and their correct and formal behaviour on all occasions stuffy in the extreme. And of all the stuffy occasions he had to endure, the weekly court reception was the stuffiest. Just as I started this story, he was winding up another of these royal and boring affairs. Hail, hail! Give majesty its proper due. Hail Randywell, King Handywell, of Brandenburg and Bompadoo. Boom, boom, boom! At each crash of the drums, the young king winced and shuddered. Then pulling himself together, he nodded resignedly to his richly attired courtiers and subjects, who were retiring backwards from the royal presence. As the last bowing figure swished through the double doors, Randy gave a huge sigh and groan. This was his 310th reception since ascending the throne. Ahead stretched hundreds more, besides the daily courts, where he acted as presiding judge to settle all disputes of the realm. Countless reviewing of troops, inspections of model goat farms, and attendance at numerous celebrations for national heroes of Regalia. "Oh, being a king is awful," choked the youthful monarch, loosening his regal cape and letting it fall unheeded to the floor. "Awful! Will it always be like this, uncle?" "Like what?" His uncle, the Grand Duke Huchefu, who was still inclining his head mechanically in the direction of the door, caught himself abruptly in the middle of a bow. "Oh, all this silly standing round and being bowed at, this hail, hail, and way for his majesty stuff. Galloping gollopers, uncle. I'd like to step out by myself occasionally without 20 footmen springing to open doors and 50 pages tooting on their blasted trumpets. Why, I cannot even cross the courtyard that a dozen guardsmen do not fall in behind me." Flouncing over to the window, Randy stared out over the royal terrace. "Even the goats on the mountain have more fun than I do," he observed bitterly. "They can run, jump, climb, and even butt one another, while Randy let his arms fall heavily at his sides. I have not even anyone to fight with. If just once somebody would punch me in the nose instead of bowing." Randy clenched and unclenched his fists. So that's what you want." Looking quizzically at his young nephew, Uncle Huchefu crossed to the bell rope and gave it a savage tug. As Randy's personal servant and valet appeared to answer the ring, he spoke sharply. Dawkins, kindly hit His Majesty in the nose." "The nose? Oh, but your lordship, I couldn't do a thing like that. 'Tisn't right, nor fitting, nor—" "I said hit him in the nose," commanded Uncle Hoochafoo, advancing grimly upon the terrified valet. "Yes, yes, like this." Bringing up his fist, Randy made such a splendid connection with the valet's nose, Dawkins toppled over backwards. Dancing from one foot to the other as the outraged servant sprang to his feet, Randy prepared to defend himself. But with his hand clapped to his nose, Dawkins was retiring rapidly. "Thank you," he muttered in a strangled voice. "Thank you very much." "Did you hear that? He said thank you," screamed Randy as Dawkins disappeared with an agitated bow. "Oh, this is too much. I wish I were back with Nandywog in Tripedalia, or anywhere but here, doing anything but this." Now, don't take things so hard," begged his uncle, patting him kindly on the shoulder. "Hard?" Randy glared at the old nobleman. "I can take things hard, uncle, but I cannot take them soft. I'll never forgive my father for getting me into this, never." Randy's father, former King of Regalia, tiring of a royal life and routine, had retired to a distant cave to live the life of a hermit. And Randy, after travelling all over Oz to fulfill the 7 difficult tests required of a Regalian ruler, had succeeded to the throne. "You should not speak like that of your royal parent," chided Uncle Hoochafoo, tapping his spectacles absently against his teeth. "For you are very much like him, my boy, very much like him. Harumph." Uncle Hoochafoo cleared his throat thoughtfully. "What you need is a change, a new interest. Ah, I have it. You must marry, my lad. You must marry. Some pretty little princess or rich young queen, and then everything will be punjanubious." "Is being married anything like being a king?" inquired Randy suspiciously. "Oh, no. No, indeed, quite the reverse." The eyes of the old Duke, who had once been married, grew glazed and pensive. "Once you are married, you will feel less like a king every day," he promised solemnly, "and the arguments alone will keep you occupied for hours." Uncle Hoochafoo raised both shoulders and eyebrows. "Wait, I'll just go consult the wise men about a proper princess for you." No, I do not wish to be married," announced Randy, stamping his foot. "I'll not marry for years," he declared stubbornly. Then, as loud outcries and tremendous thumps interrupted them, he hurried over to an open window, just in time to meet a large rock that came crashing through the amethyst pane. "Look out!" blustered Uncle Hoochafoo, jerking Randy to his feet, for the rock had completely bowled him over. "Well, I see you have your wish. How's that for a knock in the nose, my lad? Not only the nose, but also the beginning of a beautiful black eye." "Have I really?" Racing over to a mirror, Randy proudly examined his injured orb. "Oh, Uncle, isn't this fun? Who did it? What's up, do you suppose? A revolution?" Hurrying back to the window, Randy recklessly thrust out his head to stare down into the courtyard. Caillou, the gatekeeper, had his shoulder braced against the gold-studded doors in the castle wall, but even so, the doors were bulging and creaking from the thunderous blows struck from the other side. "Open in the name of the law!" boomed a tremendous voice. "Thump, thump, kabang! Open in the name of a prince of the realm! Open this door, you unmannerly scuppernong!" No, stay where you are," panted Caillou, waving desperately with one arm for the guards to come help him. "Stay where you are, or go to the rear entrance. Who do you think you are, hammering on the doors of His Majesty's castle?" "I don't think, I know," raged the voice from the other side of the wall. "I am a Prince of Pumperdink, you unspeakable clod. Open up this door before I break it down." And after even more furious thumps, another shower of rocks came flying over the wall. "Great Gillikins! I believe, why, it is! Caillou, open the door! It is a prince!" shouted Randy, using both hands as a megaphone. "'Tis nothing of the sort," grunted the gatekeeper obstinately. "I looked through me little grill but a moment ago, and it's no prince at all, but a parade of one elephant, if you please, and when I orders him to the rear entrance, he ups with his trunk and flings rocks over our wall." "But this elephant is a prince," insisted Randy, banging on the window ledge. "Besides, he's a great friend of mine." "Open the door, fool!" directed Uncle Hoochafoo, leaning so far out the window his crown fell to the paving stones. "The king has spoken. Admit this elephant at once. At once!" "And about time," fumed an indignant voice as Caillou reluctantly drew the bolts and, swinging wide the doors, stepped back to let a magnificently caparisoned elephant swing through. "A fine welcome this is, I must say, for the elegant elephant of Oz. Out of my way, Wart." Picking Caillou up in his trunk, the visitor jammed him down hard in a golden trash barrel, trumpeted fiercely at the double line of guards who had instantly sprung to attention, and went swaying across the courtyard. Now, nowhere but in Oz could an elephant talk, much less come hammering on the doors of a royal castle. But in Oz, as we very well know, animals talk and act as sensibly as people, which makes Oz about 10 times as exciting as any other country on the map. But while I've been explaining all this, Randy had run down the steps and was halfway across the courtyard. "Kabumpo! Kabumpo! Is it really you? Oh, at last you are here!" Impatiently waving aside the guards, Randy led his mammoth and still muttering guest into the palace. "Kabumpo, is it?" sniffed Caillou, jerking himself with great difficulty out of the trash barrel. "Such goings-on. Well, all I say—" The gatekeeper peered carefully over his shoulder to see that the elephant was safely inside the castle. Then, raising his arm for the benefit of the staring guards, he cried fiercely, "All I can say is, just let him show his snoot around here again, and I'll kabump him down the mountain." End of Chapter 1.
Chapter 2 of The Silver Princess in Oz. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nan Dodge. The Silver Princess in Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. Chapter 2. The Elegant Elephant of Oz. Fortunately, the doors of Randy's castle were high and wide, and the rooms so large and spacious, even a guest as large as this elephant could quite easily be accommodated. Still irritated by the gatekeeper's insolence, Kabumpo followed the young ruler to the throne room, where he sank stiffly to his haunches and waited in outraged silence for Randy to speak. Randy, however, was so surprised and happy to see his old friend and comrade, he could not utter a word. But the elegant elephant could not long withstand the honest delight and affection beaming from the young king's eyes, and under that kindly glow his wrath melted away like fog in the sunshine. "Well, well," he rumbled testily, "how do I look?" "Elegant," breathed Randy, stepping back to have a better view. "Elegant as ever. You've worn your best robe and jewels, haven't you?" "Always wear my best when I call on a king," said Kabumpo, smoothing down his embroidered collar complacently with his trunk. "And I believe you've grown a foot," went on Randy, standing on tiptoe to pat Kabumpo on the shoulder. "A foot!" roared the elegant elephant, throwing back his head. "Oh, come now! I couldn't have grown a foot without noticing it, and I still have but 4. Here, count 'em. Say, who in hay bales gave you that black eye?" "You did!" Randy fairly sputtered with mirth at Kabumpo's discomfited expression. "I was just wishing someone would hit me in the nose when along came that rock, and now look at me." "Yes," put in Uncle Hoochafoo, regarding Kabumpo severely through his monocle. "Now look at him." "Well, why didn't you tell that wart of a doorkeeper I was expected?" demanded Kabumpo explosively. "The King of Regalia does not hold conversation with his doorkeeper," explained Randy's uncle, giving the elegant elephant a very sour look. "Oh, he doesn't?" Kabumpo lurched grandly to his feet. "Well, it's time somebody told him about the elegant elephant of Oz and how he should be received and welcomed. Let me tell you, sirrah, trumpets blow when I come and go in Pumperdink." "Then why did you ever leave there?" inquired the Duke coldly. "Oh, Uncle, don't you remember? We were to review the Purple Guard at 5. "You go," urged Randy, fearful lest the tempery old Duke would still further insult the even more temporary old elephant. "Honestly, I feel a cold coming on." Randy coughed plaintively, at the same time winking at Kabumpo. "Very well, I'll go," agreed his uncle stiffly. "But do not forget there is a dinner for the grape growers at 7, a concert of the goat herdsmen at 8, maneuvers of our Highland Guards in the Royal Barracks at 9, and—" "Yes, yes, all right." Randy fairly pushed his royal relative toward the door. "An ancient pest if ever I saw one," grumbled Kabumpo, as the Grand Duke disappeared with a very grim expression. "Great gooselberries! Do we have to do all those dumb things? Why, it's 6 years since I've seen you, Randy, and I kind of thought we'd have a cozy time all to ourselves." "I never have any time to myself," sighed the young monarch wistfully. "I do nothing but lay cornerstones and raise flags and stand around at royal courts and receptions. Everybody bows and bows. Why, it's got so I even bow to myself when I look in the glass. And now," Randy raised his arms indignantly, "now Uncle Hoochafoo says I must marry." "Marry!" trumpeted Kabumpo, twinkling his eyes angrily. "What nonsense! Why, you are nowhere near old enough to marry. You were only about 10 when I met you, and that makes you 16 now, though I must say you don't look it." "Oh, no one in Oz looks his age," grinned Randy, "and you know I'd been 10 for about 4 years before I knew you, Kabumpo, so that makes me 20 or so, doesn't it?" "I don't care what it makes you," rumbled Kabumpo. "It makes me mad. And to think I actually helped get you into all this boring business. My ears and trunk, Kingling. It's up to me to get you out of it." "How?" demanded Randy, folding his arms and leaning despondently against the mantel. "How does one stop being a king, Kabumpo?" "Why, by stopping," announced the Elegant Elephant, spreading his ears to their fullest extent. "By taking a vacation, my fine young sprig. By departing and going hence for a suitable season. Do you suppose I came all the way from Pumperdink to hear goatherds tootling on bells and Highlanders tramping round a barracks? I came to see you, my boy, and nobody else." Kabumpo paused to blow his trunk explosively on a violet silk handkerchief. "And after that I thought we'd go and visit the Red Jinn." "Oh, Kabumpo, could we?" Randy's face brightened and then as quickly fell. "I don't believe Uncle Hoochafoo will let me go," he finished dolefully. "A king does not ask whether or not he may go. He goes," stated the Elegant Elephant, beginning to sway like a ship under full sail. "But to avoid all arguments, we'll not start till later. Could you be ready by midnight, young one?" "Oh, I'm ready now," declared Randy, picking up his cloak from the floor and snatching a sword from its bracket on the wall. "Why ever did you wait so long, Kabumpo? You promised to visit me 6 months after I was crowned." "Well, you know how it is at a court." The Elegant Elephant sighed and settled back on his haunches again. "If it isn't one thing, it's another. But here I am at last. So order up your dinner and a few bales of hay and a barrel of cider for me. I crave rest and refreshment." "And what about the grape growers, the goatherds, and the Highlanders?" worried Randy. "Oh, them!" exclaimed Kabumpo inelegantly. "Here." Seizing a pen from the royal desk, he scribbled the defiant message on a handy piece of parchment. "No admittance under extreme penalty of the law. Do not disturb. By special order of His Majesty, King Randywell Handywell of Brandenburg and Bompadoo." "See, I remembered all your names and I've used them all." Opening the door with his trunk, Kabumpo impaled the notice on the knob, then quietly closed the door and turned the key in the lock. And only once did they open it, and then to admit 10 flustered footmen with Randy's dinner and Kabumpo's cider and hay. To imperious raps, taps, and numerous notes thrust under the door by the young king's agitated uncle, they paid no attention whatever. They were too busy talking over old times and the exciting days when they had journeyed all over Oz, and with the help of Jinnicky, the little red Jinn, saved the royal family of Pumperdink from the witch of Follensby Forest. Pumperdink, as most of you know, is in the north-central part of the Gillikin country of Oz, and ruled by King Pompous and Queen Posy. Their son, Prince Pompadour, has much to say about affairs in that kingdom, but it is to Kabumpo, his elegant elephant, that Pompous turned oftenest for counsel and comfort. Given to the king by a celebrated Blue Emperor, Kabumpo has proved himself so wise and sagacious, Pompous depends on him for almost everything. It is Kabumpo who advises His Majesty when to have his hair cut and put aside his woolen underwear, when to go to the dentist, when to turn in his 4-horse chariot for a 12-horse model, when to save money, when to spend it, how to get on with neighboring kings, and how to get on without them. In fact, so heavy are the duties and responsibilities of this remarkable elephant, 'tis a wonder, even after 6 years, he managed this visit to Randy. Randy's first meeting with Kabumpo had been more or less by chance. Sent out disguised as a poor mountain boy to pass the 7 severe tests of kingship required of Regalian rulers, Randy had happened to come first to the kingdom of Pumperdink and had been hailed before the king as a vagrant. The elegant elephant, taking an instant fancy to the boy, had insisted that he be allowed to stay on as his own royal attendant, and in this comical capacity Randy's adventures had begun. For scarcely had he been in the palace of Pumperdink a week before Kettywig, the king's brother, and the witch of Follensby Forest, plotting to steal the crown, caused the whole royal family to disappear by some strange and fiery magic. Barely missing the same fate, Randy and Kabumpo managed to escape. On their way through the forest, they met a soothsayer who told them to seek out the Red Jinn. Now, no one in Oz had ever heard of this singular personage, but after many delays and hair-raising experiences, Randy and Kabumpo finally arrived at his splendid red glass castle. Jinnicky, it turned out, was the Wizard of Ev, and a merry and strange person he was. Jinnicky's whole body is encased in a shiny red jar into which he can retire like a turtle at will. And the little wizard's disposition is so gay and jolly, everyone round him feels the same way. Not only did he welcome his visitors, but set off immediately to help the royal family of Pumperdink out of their misfortunes and enchantment. Once in Pumperdink, Randy, with the help of the Red Jinn's magic looking-glasses, was able to trace the lost king and his family and release them from the witch's spell. But before that, and while he was traveling here and there with Kabumpo and Jinnicky, the little prince was fulfilling all the tests and conditions required by the ancient laws of regalia of their kings. In other words, he had made 3 true friends, served a strange king, saved a queen, showed bravery in battle, overcome a fabulous monster, disenchanted a princess, and received from a wizard an important magic treasure. And now, looking back on those brave, bright days, he could not help thinking that earning his crown had been more fun than wearing it. "I wish we could do it all over again," he mused, as Kabumpo, after recalling their visit to Nandywog, the little giant, tossed off the last of the cider. "But think where we're going now," gurgled Kabumpo, setting down the barrel with a resounding thud. "If something strange or exciting does not happen on the way there or back, or in Jinnicky's castle itself, I do not know my Oz and Evistery. Can't you just see Jinnicky's face when we arrive? I wonder if Ali Babel is still Grand Advizier, and if the magic dinner bell is still working. Yes! Yes? Who's there?" Kabumpo raised his voice irritably as a persistent whistling came through the keyhole. "It's Dawkins," explained an anxious voice from the other side of the door. "The Duke says as it's high time His Highness was in bed, your Highness." "Oh, be off with you!" Go dive in the feathers yourself. His Highness is going to sleep in here on the floor." Kabumpo stood so close and spoke so violently through the keyhole, Dawkins was blown back against the opposite wall. For a time, footsteps pattered up and down the corridor, and then finally, deciding the young king was to have his own way at last, the footmen and courtiers, and even Uncle Hoochafoo, took themselves off. But not till everything was absolutely quiet and still, and everyone in the castle asleep, did Kabumpo and Randy venture forth. Then, stepping softly as his own tremendous shadow, the Elegant Elephant, with the young king on his back, slipped through the silent halls and deserted courtyard, past the snoring sentries and keeper of the gate, and on out into the foresty highlands beyond the palace wall. Here, in the bright white light of a smiling moon, they took the highway to the north, for the castle of the Red Jinn lies to the north by northeast of Regalia and Oz. "How will we cross the deadly desert?" murmured Randy, drowsily clutching the few belongings he had tied up in an old silver tablecloth. In it he had his oldest suit, some clean underwear, his toothbrush, and his trusty sword. "Never cross a desert till you come to it," advised Kabumpo, "and we've crossed it before, you know." "Yes, I know." Smiling to himself, Randy dropped his head on his bundle and, lulled by the agreeable motion of his gigantic bearer, soon fell asleep, to dream pleasantly of Alibabble and of Ginger, slave of the Red Jinn's dinner bell. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3 of The Silver Princess in Oz. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nan Dodge. The Silver Princess in Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. Chapter 3. Gaper's Gulch. Kabumpo, as happy to escape from court life as Randy, moved rhythmically as a ship through the soft spring night. Humming to himself and busy with his own thoughts, he scarcely noticed that the highway was growing steeper and narrower until he was brought up sharp by an impassable barrier of rock. "Now, bosh and botherskites! I was sure this road ran straight to the deadly desert," he muttered, reaching back with his trunk to see that Randy was still safely aboard and asleep. "Beets and butternuts! Do I have to turn back or plow through all this rubble?" The Elegant Elephant's small eyes twinkled with irritation, and easing himself to the right off the highway, he peered crossly up at the offending mass of stone. Finding no way round here, he swung over to the left and examined it closely from that side, and was just about to start resignedly through the brush when he discovered that what he had taken for an especially dark shadow was really a cleft in the rock. It was barely wide enough for him to squeeze through without scraping the jewels from his robe. "Now then, shall I risk it or wait till morning?" mused Kabumpo, swaying undecidedly to and fro. "It might take us straight through to the other side of the highway. On the other trunk, it might lead into a robber's cave or plunge us suddenly over a precipice." Edging closer, the Elegant Elephant thrust his trunk into the crevice. It seemed smooth and solid, and, resolving to try it, even though little of the moonlight penetrated into the narrow opening, Kabumpo stepped inside and proceeded to pick his way cautiously along the rocky corridor. For about the length of a city street it ran straight ahead, then curved sharply to the right. Here Kabumpo was heartened to see a lantern hanging from an iron spike, while carved on the smooth rock below was a blunt message: "This is the entrance to Gaper's Gulch. Pause here and give 3 yawns and a stretch for Sleeperoo, Great, Grand, and Most Snorious Gaper." "Snorious gaper! Ho, ho! Kerumph! Who ever heard of such nonsense?" snorted Kabumpo, squinting impatiently down at the notice. "Ah, ha, ho, hum!" At this point, without seeming able to help it, the Elegant Elephant yawned so terrifically his headpiece fell over one ear, and his jaw was almost dislocated. To recover his dignity, and with tears starting from his eyes, he gave himself a quick shake, then stretched up his trunk to straighten his headgear. "Splendid!" drawled a sleepy voice. "You may now proceed as before." Blinking angrily about to see who had addressed him, the Elegant Elephant spied a round-faced and widely gaping guard standing in a little niche in the rock. Strapped to his shoulders, instead of a knapsack, was a fat feather pillow, and as Kabumpo came opposite the guard's eyes closed, and falling back against his cushion he began gently to snore. As Kabumpo stopped in some astonishment, the guard's nap was rudely interrupted by a pailful of pebbles that cascaded merrily down over his ears. There were 20 pails operating on a moving belt above his head, and at 3-minute intervals they pelted him awake, as Kabumpo presently discovered. The buttons on the guard's uniform were illuminated and spelled out his name, Winks. "Well, do I surprise you?" inquired Winks, shaking the pebbles from his shoulders and rubbing his eyes with his yellow-gloved hands. Kabumpo, too amused to speak, nodded. "And you surprise me," admitted the guard, gaping 3 times just to prove it. "You big, enormous, impossible whatever you are, you. Why, you should have been underground months ago. But that'll all be taken care of," he added smoothly. "Just follow the arrows and you cannot miss. Just follow the arrows. Just follow." As Kabumpo, fuming from what he considered a mortal insult, lunged forward, the little soldier's eyes fell shut again. Held more by curiosity than by a desire to continue the conversation, Kabumpo waited for the next bucket of pebbles to shower over the guard. "Low the arrows," went on Winks as calmly as if he'd not been interrupted at all. "There are 40 guards to point the way. 40 winks," he repeated, closing one eye. "Ha ha! To point the way. Ha ha! Ho hum! Do you get the point?" As Kabumpo started off with a little snort of disgust, he felt a slight prick in his left hind leg, for Winks, just as he fell asleep, let fly an arrow from his old-fashioned bow. Before Kabumpo had reached the end of the passageway, he had passed 40 of the Gaper guards. After his experience with the first, he did not stop for further talk, but made the best speed possible, resolved to rush through Gaper's Gulch when he came to it, without even pausing to express his contempt. The pebble awakeners were so neatly timed, each guard had a chance to speed an arrow after the flying elephant, and by the time Kabumpo reached the opening at the other end of the rocky pass, he had 40 arrows pricking through his robe or stuck here and there in his ears and ankles. With his tough hide, they hurt no more than pinpricks, but vastly indignant at such treatment, the Elegant Elephant began jerking them out with his trunk. "What do they think I am, a pincushion? Ho!" he snorted, pulling out the last one, and relieved to note that Randy had escaped the missiles entirely. Indeed, the young King of Regalia was sleeping as placidly as if he were home in his own castle. Kabumpo, too, felt unaccountably drowsy, and as he pushed his way down into the rocky little glen, his steps grew slower and slower. So far as he could see by the light of the fast waning moon, there were neither houses nor people in Gaper's Gulch. In the center of the valley, the rough stones and brush had been cleared away, and a series of flat rocks were spaced out almost like a gigantic checkerboard. Pausing beside the largest rock, Kabumpo spelled out the name of Sleeperoo the Great and Snorious. "What is this, a cemetery?" gulped the Elegant Elephant. But that could not be. for no one in Oz ever dies. Ho-hum." Leaning up against a dead pine and blinking furiously to keep awake, he pondered the unpleasant situation. Then, deciding that, cemetery or not, he must have some sleep, he lifted Randy down from his back and rolled him in a blanket he had thoughtfully brought along. Then, divesting himself of his jeweled robe and headpiece, Kabumpo stretched out carefully beside his young comrade, and in 20 minutes was fast asleep. How long he slumbered, Kabumpo never knew, but from a nightmare in which he was struggling in a bank of treacherous quicksand, he awoke with a frightful sinking feeling to find he was surrounded by 40 more of the Gaper guards. Their buttons were also lit up, and on each plump chest he could read the word "Wake." The Wakes were busily at work with pick and spade, and unlike the Winks, did not seem the least bit drowsy. Half convinced he was still asleep and dreaming, Kabumpo peered out at them through half-closed lids, then gave a tremendous grunt. Great Gillikins! He was sinking! The busy little Wakes had dug a trench at least 20 feet deep all around him, and now, careless of their own safety, were shoveling away at the mound on which he was still precariously resting. "Quick, a few more to the right," directed a crisp little voice. "Watch yourself there, Torpy. Ah, here he comes. Heads up, lads." As the Chief Wake spoke, Kabumpo felt the mound give way, and down he rolled into the pit, while the Wakes scrambled frantically up the sides. "Did you hear that fierce toot?" puffed the little guard addressed as Torpy. "It's a Wake, fellows. What's wrong with those sleeping arrows? Don't they work any more? I myself saw 40 sticking in the big whatsits when he came pounding out of the pass. Hurry, hurry, let's get him underground." And seizing their picks and spades again, the Gaper guards began shoveling dirt into the pit, paying no attention to Kabumpo's furious blasts and bellows, which grew wilder and more anguished as he suddenly realized that Randy was no longer beside him. "What have you done with the boy? Halt! Stop! How dare you cast dirt on an Imperial Prince of Pumperdink, or try to bury the elegant Elephant of Oz?" Shaking the mud from his head and raising his trunk, Kabumpo let out such an ear-splitting trumpet 20 Wakes fell to their knees, and the others dropped pick and shovel and stared at him in positive dismay. "But, sir, it is quite customary to bury all visitors," quavered Torpy as soon as he could make himself heard. "We'll dig you up in 6 months and you'll be good as new. Our dormitories are so very comfortable, and all Gapers lie dormant for 6 months." "But I'm not a Gaper!" screamed Kabumpo, interrupting himself with a yawn, both wide and gusty. "Oh, but you soon will be," asserted Torpy, squinting down at him earnestly. "Why, you're gaping already. Now lie down like a good beast. Sleeping underground is lovely." "Lovely!" repeated all the rest of the Wakes, beginning to croon as they shoveled. Kabumpo, opening his mouth to protest again, caught a bushel of earth between his tusks, and half choked and blind with rage, the Elegant Elephant hurled himself at the side of the pit. He could almost reach the top with his trunk, and as the Wakes, squealing with alarm, shoveled faster and faster, he wound his trunk round an old tree stump, and by main strength hauled himself up over the edge. "Now," he bellowed, spreading his ears like sails, "where have you buried the boy? Quick, speak up or I'll pound you to splinters." Snatching a log in his trunk, Kabumpo surged forward, but the terrified Wakes, instead of answering, fled for their lives, leaving Kabumpo all alone in the ghostly little valley. "Randy, Randy, where are you? Oh, my poor boy, are you suffocated?" Galloping this way and that, Kabumpo peered desperately about for a patch of newly turned earth, but only the wind whistling drearily through the dead branches of the pine trees came to answer him. Frantic with worry, the Elegant Elephant began pounding with his log on the headstones of the dormant gapers, trumpeting at the same time in a way to wake the dead. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4 of The Silver Princess in Oz. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nan Dodge. The Silver Princess in Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. Chapter 4. Out of Gaper's Gulch. Now the Gapers were not dead, but only sleeping, and soon the dormant natives of this strange hibernation lifted up their headstones and began blinking out indignantly to see what and who had got loose in their quiet valley. "Silence! Cease! Desist!" shuddered Sleeperoo the Great and Snorious, holding up his headstone with one hand and waving his other arm feebly at Kabumpo. "A bit more of that racket and we'll be roused for months. Who are you, and what is the meaning of all this humbuggery?" Gaping 10 times in quick succession, Sleeperoo stuck out his lip at the Elegant Elephant. Kabumpo, startled by the spectacle of 100 lifted headstones and the round, dirty, moon-like faces gaping up at him, said nothing for a whole minute. Then, stepping over to the Chief Gaper, he burst out angrily, "I am a traveler whom your guards stuck full of arrows and then tried to bury. The young king who was with me has disappeared. I, the Elegant Elephant of Oz and Pumperdink, demand his release. What have you done with the King of Regalia? Produce him at once, or I'll stand here and trumpet till doomsday." To show he meant what he said, Kabumpo let out such a terrific blast, the headstones of his listeners rocked and shivered. "Oh, my head! My ears! My ears, my dears! Give him what he's yelling for," sobbed Sleeperoo, crouching under his headstone as Kabumpo lifted his trunk for another trumpet. "Is this a king?" called a fretful voice, and lurching round, Kabumpo saw a fat old Gaper now halfway above ground. Balancing his stone on his fat head, he held Randy out at arm's length. "Instead of digging him a proper bed, they stuck him in with me," he complained. "Here, take him. He kicks like a mule, and I can't abide a kicker." With a relieved grunt, Kabumpo snatched Randy from the Gaper's damp clutches, thankful the boy still had strength enough to kick. Randy's face was quite pale and covered with dirt, but after a few anxious shakes he opened his eyes and looked confusedly round him. "It's nothing," sniffed Kabumpo. "It's quite all right, my boy. You've just been buried to the ears and sleeping with a groundhog." "Buried?" shivered Randy as Kabumpo set him gently on his back. "Not buried at all, just lying dormant as a sensible body should," corrected the old Gaper, dropping out of sight with a slam of his headstone. "Go away, please go away," begged Sleeperoo, as Kabumpo began stepping gingerly between the stones. "You're ruining our rest, you big bullying behemoth." "I'll not stir a step till you send a guide to lead me out of this gulch," declared Kabumpo. "Call a guard, or I'll call one myself." "No, no, please not. Torpy, Snorpy, I say, Torpy," wheezed Sleeperoo, stretching up his thin neck. "Come, come, all of you at once, at once." As quickly as they had vanished, the Wakes slid from behind boulders and trees and up out of rocky crevices, their buttons twinkling cheerfully in the dark. "Conduct these travelers to the head of the valley," ordered Sleeperoo, with a weak wave at the Gaper guards. "I thought this was a gulch," yawned Kabumpo, while Randy began to shake the dirt from his hair and ears. "A gulch is a valley," sniffed Sleeperoo, lowering himself crossly. "Look it up in any Pictionary. A gulch is a valley or chasm." "And Gaper's Gulch is a yawning chasm," mumbled Kabumpo, as the Chief Gaper and all the others began ducking back into their holes, like rabbits into warrens. Good night to you, he added, as the last stone slammed down. Now then, you boys fetch my headpiece and robe from that pit, and let's start on. Kabumpo spoke so sharply, 10 Wakes sprang to obey, and after they had brought them and both had been adjusted to Kabumpo's liking, he signaled imperiously for Torpy and Snorpy to lead the way, and their companions took thankfully to their heels. For a while the 2 little Wakes marched ahead in a subdued silence as the Elegant Elephant picked his way around rocks and tree stumps. Not mad, I hope? Torpy, most talkative of the 2, looked anxiously over his shoulder. No, no, certainly not. I don't know when I've spent a more delightful evening, Kabumpo said. Being stuck full of arrows and then buried alive is such splendid entertainment. Oh, I say now, it cannot all be alike, put in Snorpy, coming to the rescue of his embarrassed companion. If those arrows had taken effect, you'd have been dead asleep before we buried you, and known nothing for 6 months. That's a lot of sleep to miss, Mr. Kabumpo, chuckled Randy, who was now wide awake and quite recovered from his harrowing experience. But you see, Kabumpo and I sleep every night and not all in one stretch as you do. More trouble that way, murmured Snorpy, shaking his head disapprovingly. Keeps you hopping up and down all the time. In the gulch we sleep half the year and then we are done with it. And what do you do when you are not sleeping? Inquired Kabumpo, stifling a yawn with his trunk. We eat, grinned Snorpy, his eyes twinkling brighter than his buttons. Breakfast from July 1st to August 31st, lunch from September 1st till October 31st, and dinner from November 1st till New Year's. You mean you eat straight through without stopping? Gasped Randy, raising himself on one elbow. All the time you're awake? Don't you ever work, play, or go on journeys? I do not know what you mean by work, play, and go on journeys, but whatever they are, we don't. We eat and sleep, sleep and eat, and everything is perfectly gorgeous, confided the Wake with a satisfied skip. Gorging is gorgeous to some people, I suppose. Kabumpo tossed his head to show it was not his way. Then how is it you fellows are not sleeping along with the other gapers? Oh, we're trained to sleep in summer and fall and to eat in winter and spring. The Winks are not so clever at staying awake as we are, but they'll learn. And meanwhile, the pebbles keep them fairly active. Yes, active enough to shoot at visitors, grunted Kabumpo, winking back at Randy. Do you shoot one another asleep, or is that a special treat you reserve for travelers? We just shoot at travelers, admitted Snorpy quite cheerfully. Otherwise, they would interfere with our customs, interrupt our sleeping and eating, and wake us up out of season. Just as we did, chuckled Randy. I suppose we interrupted your dinner, this being one of the dinner months? Both guards nodded, exchanging pleased little smiles. Come on back and have a bite with us, invited Snorpy generously. We've weak fish for the first week, chops for the second. Randy, tugging at Kabumpo's collar, begged him to stop, for Randy was hungry as a brace of bears. But the Elegant Elephant, shaking his head till all his jewels rattled, declined the invitation with great firmness. No knowing what will come of it, he whispered to his disappointed young comrade. Might put us to sleep for a century, and it's about all I can do to keep my eyes open now. Wait till we're out of this goopy gulch, my lad, and we'll eat and sleep like gentlemen. After all, we are gentlemen, and not groundhogs. Urging his guides to greater speed, the weary beast pushed doggedly on through the brush and stubble. Snorpy and Torpy, insulted by the shortness with which the Elegant Elephant had refused their invitation, had little more to say, and in less than an hour had brought the travelers to the end of the rocky little valley. From where they stood, a crooked path wound crazily upward, and with a silent wave aloft, the 2 Wakes turned and ran. Back to their dinner, sighed Randy, looking hungrily after them. But Kabumpo, charmed to see the last of the ghostly gulch and its inhabitants, began to ascend the path, not even stopping for breath till he had come to the top. Even after this, he traveled on for about 5 miles to make sure no sleepy vapors or gapers would trouble them again. The moon had waned and the stars grown faint as he stopped at last in a small patch of woodland. Here, without removing his headpiece or robe, Kabumpo braced his back against a mighty oak and fell asleep on his feet, and Randy, soothed and rocked by his tremendous snores, soon closed his eyes and slept also. End of chapter 4.
Chapter 5 of The Silver Princess in Oz. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen. The Silver Princess in Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. Headway. When Randy wakened, Kabumpo had already started on, grumbling under his breath because nowhere in sight was there a green bush, a tree, or anything at all that an elephant or little boy might eat. "Where are we?" yawned Randy, sitting up and rubbing his eyes with his knuckles. "Great Gillikens, this is as bad as Gaper's Gulch." "All the countries bordering on the Deadly Desert are queer, no-account little places," sniffed the Elegant Elephant, angrily jerking his robe off a cactus. "And from the feel of the air, we must be near the desert now." At mention of the Deadly Desert, Randy lapsed into an uneasy silence, for how could they ever cross this tract of burning sand, and how could they reach Eve or Jinnicky's castles until they did cross it? While this vast belt of destroying sand effectively kept enemies out of Oz, it also kept the Ozians in. "If we only had some of Jinnicky's magic, or even his silver dinner bell, to bring us a good breakfast," sighed Randy, glancing round hungrily. "Pretty stupid of me not to have brought along a lunch. And there's not even a brook or stream in this miserable little patch of woods where a body could quench his thirst. Maybe it will rain, and that would help a little." "Maybe," admitted Kabumpo, squinting up at the leaden sky. "Anyway, here we are out of the woods. But take a look at those rocks." "And those heads behind the rocks," whispered Randy, clutching Kabumpo's collar. "There's something pretty odd about those heads, if you ask me," wheezed the Elegant Elephant, curling up his trunk. "Odd, or I'm losing my eye and ear sight." "Odd?" hissed Randy, tightening his hold on Kabumpo's collar. "Good goats and gravy! They're flying round loose like birds. Why, they've got no bodies on 'em, no bodies at all." "Read the sign," directed Kabumpo, uncurling his trunk and pointing to a crude warning scratched on a flat slab at the edge of the road leading to the rocky promontory above. "Heads up! This road leads to Headland. Nobody's allowed." "Humph! Well, we won't make much headway without our bodies," grunted Kabumpo, as Randy read the message slowly to himself. "Such impudence! Why should we pay any attention to such stuff? Bodies or not, we're going on. And how can fellows minus feet and arms hope to stop us?" "They might crash down on us with their heads," worried Randy, as an angry flock of headmen circled round and round at the top of the road. "And those heads look hard." Not any harder than mine. Keep your crown on, Randy," advised Kabumpo grimly. "The spikes will dent him good, and if you reach down in my left hand pocket you'll find a short club. The club will be better than your sword. You can't cut a head off no neck, and besides, we don't really want to injure the pests. All ready? Then here we go." Randy did not answer, for hooking his heels through Kabumpo's harness, he was already delving into the capacious pocket on the left side of the Elegant Elephant's robe, discovering not only a club but a quiver full of darts. Jerking himself upright, the club in one hand, the darts in the other, he peered aloft with growing anxiety as foot over foot Kabumpo climbed up the granite slope. The faces of the Headmen were round and deeply wrinkled from the hot winds blowing off the desert. Their ears, huge and fan shaped, flapped like wings, and like wings propelled them through the air. Before Kabumpo reached the top, a whole bevy came whizzing towards them, screaming out indignant threats and warnings. "Off! Be off!" they shouted hysterically. "Off with their arms! Off with their legs! Off with their bodies! Halt! Stop! Begone, you miserable creepy crawly creatures! You dare not set a foot on our beautiful headland!" "Oh, daren't we?" Kabumpo shook his trunk belligerently. "And who is to stop us, pray?" "I am," rasped the ugliest of the Headmen, snatching a coil of wire from a niche in the rocks with his teeth. The ugly little Mugly came flapping toward them. Another of the Headmen hastened to seize the opposite end of the wire in his teeth, and stretching it between them, they came rushing on. "Watch out!" warned Randy, dropping flat between Kabumpo's ears. "They're going to trip you up." "Wrong! How wrong!" chattered all the Headmen, bobbing up and down like balloons let off their strings. "They're going to cut off his body," confided one of the long nosed tribesmen, zooming down to whisper this information in Randy's ear. "The creature's head is welcome enough, and with those enormous ears he'll have no trouble flying. But his body, oh, his body is awful and must stay behind. And your body, too, you little monster. We'll cut that off, too," promised the Headman in his oily voice. "What use is a body, anyway? I see you have very small ears, but they can be stretched, and just wait till you've been debodicated. You'll feel so right and light and flighty." "Help! Stop! Help! Help!" screamed Randy, as the ugly Mugly gave him a playful nip on the ear. "Back up, Kabumpo! Back down! They're going to catch you in that wire and choke you." "Faugh! Nonsense!" panted the Elegant Elephant, and heaving himself up over the last barrier, he stepped confidently out on the rocky plateau. "Heads up! Heads up!" shrilled the Headman, while the two with the wire, deftly encircled Kabumpo's great neck, began to fly apart in order to draw the noose tighter. Kabumpo ducked, but much too late, and though his ferocious trumpeting sent swarms of Headmen fluttering aloft, the two holding the wire stuck to their task, pulling and jerking with their teeth until Kabumpo's jeweled collar was pressing uncomfortably into his throat. "Don't worry," he grunted gamely. "Their teeth will give way before my neck does. Calm yourself, my boy. Calm yourself." But how could Randy feel calm with his best friend in such a predicament and already beginning to gasp for breath? Jumping up and down on Kabumpo's back, he rattled his club valiantly, but the Headmen were too high up for him to reach, and when at last he flung the club with all his strength at one on the left, it seemed to make no impression at all on the hard head of the enemy. Redoubling his efforts, he drew the wire tighter and tighter in his yellow teeth. In desperation, Randy suddenly remembered the darts, and drawing one from the quiver, sent it speeding upward. The first missed, but as the Elegant Elephant began to sway and quiver beneath him, the second found its mark, striking the headman squarely in the middle of the forehead. An expression of surprise and dismay overspread his wrinkled features, and the next instant, with a terrific yawn, he dropped the wire and fell headlong to the rocks, where he rolled over and over and over. "Great Goopers!" exclaimed Randy, hardly able to believe his luck. "Why, he's not hurt at all, but has fallen asleep." "Watch the others!" gulped Kabumpo, shaking his head in an effort to free it from the wire. Already another had flown to take his fallen comrade's place. But before he could snatch the wire, Randy brought him to earth with one of his sharply pointed darts. The next who ventured he shot down too, and the rest of the band came swarming down to see what was happening. Randy sent arrow after arrow winging into their midst, till the flat, smooth rock was dotted with sleepy heads, for each one hit promptly fell asleep. Though his arm ached and his heart thumped uncomfortably, Randy did not even pause for breath till he had sent the last arrow into the air, and then quite suddenly he realized he had won this strange and ridiculous battle. More than half of the Earmen, as he could not help calling them to himself, lay snoring on the ground. The rest with terrified shrieks and whistles were flapping off as fast as their ears would carry them. Now entirely free of the wire, but still trembling and gasping, Kabumpo stared angrily at them. "What I cannot understand," puffed Randy, sliding to the ground to examine a group of the enemy, "is what put them to sleep. I thought your darts might hurt or head them off or puncture them like balloons, but instead, here they are asleep. And how asleep? Shall I pull out the arrows? I might need them later." "They are not my arrows," Kabumpo said, wrinkling his forehead in a puzzled frown. "I didn't have any arrows, but ha ha, kerumph!" The Elegant Elephant began to shake all over. "They must be Gaper arrows. The Wakes must have stuck them in my pocket when they fetched my robe and headpiece. Pretty cute of the little rascals at that. Why, these must be the same arrows the Winks shot at me, Randy, but my hide was too tough for them, and they didn't work." "Well, they certainly made short work of the Headman," said Randy, turning one over gently with his foot. "Goodness, I thought you'd be choked and done for, old fellow." "Who, me? Nonsense. My neck would have broken their teeth in another minute or two." "Well, then, shall I pull out the arrows?" asked Randy, who had his own opinion about Kabumpo's narrow escape. "We could use them again some time." "No, no, leave them in. So long as those arrows stick fast the little villains will sleep fast, and that's the only way I can stand 'em." "But suppose the others fly back?" Randy still hesitated. "Pooh, don't you worry about that." Kabumpo raised his trunk scornfully. "They're frightened out of their wits and probably half way to the Sapphire City by this time. And when they do come back, we won't be here." "Won't we?" Dubious Randy began to pace across the bare and arid plateau. "I certainly don't think much of Headland, do you?" "I wouldn't have it for a gift. even if they threw in a tusk brush and diamond earrings besides," snorted Kabumpo. "Why, it's nothing but a humpy bumpy acre of rock without a tree, a house, a bird, or even a blade of grass. I'd give the whole country for a mouthful of hay or a bucketful of water." "We might find a spring among the rocks," proposed Randy, hurrying along hopefully. "More likely a fall," predicted Kabumpo, trudging gloomily behind him. But just then Randy, who had vanished behind a sizable boulder, gave an excited whoop. "Hi yi, Kabumpo! We're here right on the edge of it," he shouted vociferously. "Look!" The Elegant Elephant, pushing around the rock, did look. Then, mopping his forehead with the tip of his robe, sank heavily to his haunches, and for a moment neither said a word. For truly enough, the jagged point of headland projected over the desert as a high cliff hangs over the sea. Below, the seething sand smoked, churned, and tumbled, sending up sulphurous waves of heat that made both travelers cough and splutter. "So, all we have to do is cross," gasped Randy, dashing the tears brought by the smoke out of his eyes. "And a simple thing that will be," grunted the Elegant Elephant sarcastically, "seeing that 1 foot on the sand spells instant destruction. If we could just flap our ears like Headmen, we could fly across." "But as we can't," sighed Randy, seating himself despondently on a boulder, "what are we to do?" "Well, that remains to be seen," muttered Kabumpo, who had not the faintest notion. "Never cross a deadly desert on an empty stomach, is my motto, and I'm going to stick to it." "Sticking to mottos won't get us anywhere," Randy said, skimming a stone off the edge and watching with a little shudder as it was sucked down into the whirling sand. "Doesn't that desert make you thirsty? Goopers! If I had a dipful of water I'd gladly do without the breakfast." "Humph! Looks as though you might have that wish." Feeling hurriedly in the right pocket of the robe, Kabumpo dragged out a waterproof as large as a tent. "Just spread this over me, will you?" he puffed anxiously. "Storm coming. Hear that thunder? Storm coming." "Coming?" cried Randy, springing up to help Kabumpo with the buckles. "Why, it's here!" He had to raise his voice to a scream to make himself heard above the gale that, arising apparently from nowhere, struck them furiously from behind. He had just fastened the last strap of the waterproof to Kabumpo's left ankle when the rain swept down in perfect torrents, rain accompanied by hailstones as big as Easter eggs. There was ample room for Randy beneath the Elegant Elephant, and standing between his front legs, the young monarch lifted the waterproof and reaching out caught a huge hailstone in his hand. Touching it against his parched lips, Randy gave a sigh of content, then, crunching it up rapturously, stuck out his head and let the pelting downpour cool his hot and dusty face. "Wonder if this will put out the desert," he mused, ducking back as a terrible clap of thunder boomed like a cannon shot overhead. "Say, it's a lucky thing you're so big, Kabumpo," he called up cheerily, "or we'd be blown away. Whee! Listen to that wind, would you?" "Have to do more than listen," howled the Elegant Elephant, bracing his feet and lowering his head. "Ahoy, below! Catch hold of something, Randy. Help! Hi! Hold on! Hold on! For the love of blue mountains! Here we go! Here we blow! Oomph! Bloomph!" "Ker-ah!" "Oh, no, Kabumpo, no!" Leaping up, Randy caught the Elegant Elephant's broad belt. "Put on the brakes, quick!" And Kabumpo did try making a futile stand against the tearing wind. But the mighty gale, whistling under his waterproof, filled it up and out like a balloon, and, with a regular ferry boat blast, Kabumpo rose into the air and zoomed like a zeppelin over the Deadly Desert, while Randy, hanging grimly to the strap of his belt, banged to and fro like the clapper on a bell. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6 of The Silver Princess in Oz. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen. The Silver Princess in Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. The Other Side of the Desert. Remembering the deadly and destroying nature of the sands below, Randy did not dare to look down. Besides, holding on took all his strength and attention, for Kabumpo was borne like a leaf before the howling gale, faster and faster and faster, till he and Randy were too dazed and dizzy to know or care how far they had gone or where they were blowing to. Which was perhaps just as well, for, as suddenly as it had risen, the gale abated and coasting down the last high hill of the wind, saved from a serious crash only by his faithful tarpaulin, which now acted as a parachute, Kabumpo came jolting to the earth. With closed eyes and trunk held stiffly before him, the Elegant Elephant remained perfectly motionless, awaiting destruction and wondering vaguely how it would feel. He was convinced that they had come down on the desert itself. Then, as no fierce blasts of heat assailed him, he ventured to open one eye. Randy, shaken loose by the force of the landing, had rolled to the ground a few feet away, and now, jumping to his feet, cried joyously: "Why, it's over, Kabumpo! Over, and so are we! Ho! I never knew you could fly, old Push the Foot!" "Neither did I," shuddered the Elegant Elephant, and jerking off the waterproof he flung it as hard and as far as he could. "Oh, don't do that!" Randy dashed away to pick it up. "That good old coat saved our bacon and ballooned us across the desert as light as a couple of daisies." "But we're no better off on this side than on the other," grumbled Kabumpo, surveying the barren countryside with positive hatred. "Not a house, a field, a farm, or a castle in sight." "The idea was to get away from castles, wasn't it?" Randy grinned at his huge friend and folding the waterproof into a neat packet, tucked it back in its place. "Well, there's one thing about castles," observed the Elegant Elephant, giving his robe a quick tug here and there. "At least the food's regular. I could eat a royal dinner, from soup to napkins." "Give me a boost up that tree and I'll have a look around," proposed Randy. "Need a spy glass to find anything worth looking at in this country," complained Kabumpo, lifting Randy onto the fork of a gnarled old tree. Shinning expertly up the rough trunk, Randy looked carefully in all directions. "We certainly cleared the desert by a nice margin," he called down gaily. "It's at least a mile behind us, and toward the east I see a cluster of white towers that might be a castle." "And nothing between?" mourned Kabumpo with a hungry swallow. "No fields, orchards, or melon patches?" "There are fields, but they're too far away for me to see what's growing, And there's a forest, too. What country is this, Kabumpo? Do you know?" "Depends on how we blew," answered the Elegant Elephant, lifting Randy out of the tree and tossing him lightly over his shoulder. "If we blew straight from the headland, which is certainly the northwestern tip of the Gilliken country of Oz, we should be in No Land. If we blew slantwise, this would be Ix." "Then I hope we blew slantwise." Randy spread himself out luxuriantly behind Kabumpo's ears. "For if we are in Ix, we have only one country to cross before we reach Ev and Jinnicky's castle." "And the sooner we start, the sooner we'll arrive," agreed Kabumpo, swinging into motion. "But if I drop in my tracks, boy, don't be too surprised. I'm hollow as a drum and weak as a violet." "Too bad we're not like the Headmen," said Randy, who felt dreadfully hollow himself. "Without a body, I suppose one does not feel hungry. Wonder what became of them, anyway?" "Who cares?" snuffed Kabumpo, picking his way crossly through the rocks and brambles. "They probably blew about for a while, but with ears like sails, what's a gale of wind or weather? Ho, what's that I see yonder? A farmer?" "No, just a hat stuck to a pole to scare away the crows," Randy told him after a careful squint. "But nothing grows in the field but rocks, so why do they bother?" "Did you say a hat?" Kabumpo's small eyes began to burn and twinkle, and breaking into a run he was across the field like a flash. "Kabumpo!" gasped Randy, as the Elegant Elephant snatched the hat from the pole and took a huge bite from the brim. "Surely, surely you're not going to eat that old hat?" "Why not?" demanded the Elegant Elephant, cramming the rest of the hat into his mouth and crunching it up with great gusto. "It's straw, isn't it? A little old and tough, to be sure, but nourishing and anyway better than nothing." Almost strangling on the ground, Kabumpo glanced sharply across the field, then looked apologetically back at his young rider. "Great gooseberries!" he muttered contritely. "I'm sorry as a goat. Why, I never saved you even an edge." "Oh, never mind," choked Randy, holding his sides at the very idea of such a thing. "Even if I were starving, I couldn't eat a hat. But look, old Push the Foot, isn't that a barn showing over the top of that hill?" "Barn?" wheezed Kabumpo, lifting his trunk joyfully. "Why, so it is. Ho! This is something like." And hiccuping excitedly from the effects of the hat, no doubt, Kabumpo went galloping over the brow of the little hill. A pleasant valley dotted with small farms stretched out below. Randy was relieved to note that its inhabitants were usual looking beings like himself. Children rode gleefully on wagons piled high with hay. Farmers in wide brimmed yellow hats, rather like those worn by the Winkies in Oz, worked placidly in the fields. Everyone seemed contented, calm, and happy. That is, until Kabumpo, delighted to find himself again in a land of plenty, came charging down the hill trumpeting like a whole band of music. "Oh, too bad! You frightened them nearly out of their wits," mourned Randy, hanging on to Kabumpo's collar to keep his balance, as the Elegant Elephant, forgetting his elegance, made a dash for the nearest hayrick. "Help! Hi! Stop! Now see what you've done!" To tell the truth, the havoc ensuing was not all Kabumpo's fault. no one in this tranquil valley of Ix had ever seen an elephant before, and the sight of one rushing down upon them was so unnerving and strange they fled in every direction, leaping into barns and houses, and barring and double barring the doors against this terrifying monster. Horses hitched to their hay wagons cantered madly east and west, and the air was filled with loud shrieks, neighs, and the bellows of stampeding cattle. "Such dummies!" panted Kabumpo, coming to a complete standstill. "Well," he gave a tremulous sniff, "if they don't want to meet a king, a prince, and the most elegant elephant in Oz, what do we care? I've invited myself to breakfast anyhow, and they can like it or can bump it. Just wait till I load away one stack of this hay, my boy, and I'll find you a breakfast fit for a king and traveler." And the Elegant Elephant was good as his word. After tossing down a great mound of new mown hay, he swaggered over to the nearest farmhouse. Pushing in the kitchen window with his trunk, he handed up to Randy everything the little farmer's wife had on her kitchen table: a bowl of milk, a pat of butter, a loaf of bread, a cold half chicken, and 3 hard-boiled eggs. "Do control yourself, Madame," he advised, as the palpitating little lady flattened herself against the opposite wall. "These pearls will more than pay for your provisions." Afraid to touch the lovely chain Kabumpo placed on the table, the little Ixie watched with round eyes as Kabumpo backed away. "Ho, I guess that will give her something to tell her grandchildren," snorted the Elegant Elephant. Randy was too busy taking rapturous bites, first of bread and then of chicken, to answer. "Why is that everything tastes so much better when you are traveling," he remarked a bit later, as he finished off the rest of the chicken and put the bread, butter, and eggs away for lunch. "'Cause we're hungrier, I suppose," smiled Kabumpo, crossing another field. "And then there's the novelty." Recalling the straw hat with a little chuckle, Kabumpo winked back at his young rider. "But now that we've breakfasted I think we'd better be moving. I see some of these farmers gathering up their courage and their pitchforks, and I'm too full to fight." "Pooh! They couldn't hurt us," boasted Randy, stretching out comfortably. "I rather wish they hadn't run off, though. I'd like to ask them something about the country, and you know, Kabumpo, I've never ridden on a hay wagon in all my life, and I'd sort of like to try it." "That's the worst of being a king," observed Kabumpo, walking carefully around a brown calf. "You miss a lot of the common and ordinary pleasures." "Hmm, hmm. Let's see now. All the horses have run off, but there's still a heap of hay about, so why shouldn't you have a ride?" "Without any wagon?" inquired Randy, looking wistfully at the largest of the haystacks. "Why not?" puffed Kabumpo. And lifting Randy hurriedly down from his back, he rushed at the hayrick, burrowing it with tusk, feet, and trunk till he was in the exact center; then heaving up with his back and forward with his trunk, he pushed till his head stuck out the other side. "Come on," he grunted triumphantly. "You'll not only have your hayride, but I'll have my lunch." Throwing Randy to the top of the load, the Elegant Elephant looked far from elegant, set off at a lumbersome gallop, carrying the haystack right along with him. At sight of his prize hayrick apparently running away by itself, The outraged owner stuck his head out of the window and screamed. But that did not bother Kabumpo. The load was but a feather's weight to him, and with the young King of Regalia dancing and yelling on the top, he swept merrily through the startled valley. Those at the lower end who had not seen Kabumpo arrive, now catching sight of a load of hay moving off by itself, simply fell against fences and barn doors, blinking and gulping with astonishment, too stunned and shocked to return the gay greetings of the nonchalant young Gillikin riding the load. Kabumpo, sampling stray wisps as he ran, and peering out comically from under the hay, enjoyed to the utmost the sensation he was causing. "Make a wish, my boy," he shouted exuberantly. "It's awfully lucky to wish on the first load of hay." "Then I wish we would reach the Red Jinn's castle before night," decided Randy. "And wouldn't Jinnicky laugh if he could see us now? Did you leave a pearl for the hay, Kabumpo?" "Certainly," retorted the elephant, speaking rather stuffily through the haystack. "We're travelers, not thieves. Hi! What's ahead, my lad? This load has shifted a bit over my left eye, and I can scarcely see out of my right." "A dry river bed," called Randy, bouncing up and down with the keenest enjoyment. "Go slow, old Push the Foot, or you'll lose your lunch." "Not on your life," puffed the Elegant Elephant. "I'll stop and eat it first. Ho! Hayfoot, Strawfoot, any foot will do. Down the bank and up the bank, and now how is the view?" "Elegant," breathed Randy, grinning to himself at Kabumpo's verses. "More fields, meadows, forests, everything." "But even so, I smell sulphur." Kabumpo moved his trunk slowly from side to side. "Something's burning, my lad, and close at hand, too." "Why, it's a horse!" Randy's voice cracked from the sheer shock of the thing. "And coming straight for us, too. Wait! Stop! Hold on! No, maybe you'd better run. Great Gillikens, it's smoking!" "A pipe?" inquired Kabumpo, trying to see through the fringe of hay that was obscuring his vision. "And what if it is? Am I, the Elegant Elephant of Oz, to run from a mere and miserable equine?" "But this horse," squealed Randy, sliding head first off the haystack. "This horse is different. Oh, really, really, Kabumpo, I think we'd better run." "Never!" Pushing the hay off his forehead with his trunk, Kabumpo looked fiercely out. Then, with a start that dislodged half the load, he began backing off as rapidly as he could, dragging Randy along by the tail of his coat. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7 of The Silver Princess in Oz. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen. The Silver Princess in Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. The Princess of Another Planet. Even so, Kabumpo was not fast enough, and as the immense black charger with its tail and mane curling like smoke, its fiery nostrils flashing flames a foot long, came galloping upon them, Randy flung himself face down on the ground to escape its burning breath. The most terrifying thing about the black steed was the complete silentness of its coming. Its metal shod feet struck the earth without making a sound. giving Kabumpo such a sense of unreality he could not believe it was true, nor move another step. In consequence, as the enormous animal swirled to halt before him, a dozen darting flames from its nostrils set fire to the load of hay on his back, enveloping him in a hot and exceedingly dangerous bonfire. Now thoroughly aroused, Kabumpo leaped this way and that, and Randy, unmindful of his own danger, jumped up and tried to beat out the fire with his cloak. But the hay blazed and crackled, and the Elegant Elephant would certainly have been roasted like a potato had he not reared up on his hind legs and let the whole burning burden slide from his back. Scorched and infuriated, his royal robes burned and blackened. Kabumpo backed into a handy brook and sat down, from which position he glared with positive hatred at his prancing adversary. But a complete change had come over this strange and unbelievable steed. His nostrils no longer spurted flames, and as Randy plumped down beside Kabumpo, deciding this was the safest spot for both of them, the lordly creature dropped to its knees and touched its forehead 3 times to the earth. "Away, away, you big meddlesome menace!" panted the Elegant Elephant, throwing up his trunk. "Begone, you good for nothing hay burner!" "But Kabumpo," pleaded Randy, as the horse, paying no attention to the Elegant Elephant's angry screeches, began throwing little puffs of red smoke into the air. "He's trying to give us a message. Look!" "Hail and salutations!" The words floated out smoothly and ranged themselves in a neat line. "I hereby acknowledge you as my master. I can flash fire from the eye, the nose, and the mouth. But you flash fire from the whole body. Hail and salutations from Thun, the Thunder Colt. Yonder rests my mistress Planetty, Princess of Anuther Planet. Who are you, great and much to be envied spurter of fire?" "Sky writing?" gasped Randy. "Oh, Kabumpo, how we going to answer? He did not hear your scolding. I don't believe he can hear at all. Fire sputter? Ho, ho! And how are you going to keep up that reputation?" "I'm not," grunted Kabumpo, but in a much less savage voice, for he was almost completely won over by the Thunder Colt's flattery. "Hum, hum! Let me see now. Couldn't we signal to the silly brute? There he stands looking up in the air for an answer." "Well," Randy said, "with your trunk and my arms we could form any number of letters, so—" "This is Kabumpo, Elegant Elephant of Oz. I am Randy, King of Regalia." With infinite pains and patience the two spelled out the message. Puzzled at first, then seeming to understand, Thun's clear yellow eyes snapped and twinkled with interest. Tossing his smoky mane, he puffed a single word into the air: "Come!" Then away he flashed at his noiseless gallop. "Shall we?" cried Randy, jumping out of the creek, for he was curious to know more about the Thunder Colt and to meet the Princess of Anuther Planet. "Are you cooled off? Did the water put you out?" "Oh, I'm put out all right," grumbled Kabumpo, lurching up the bank. "Very put out and in splendid shape to meet a Princess, I must say." "Come on, you don't look so bad," urged Randy, tugging impatiently at his tusk, while Kabumpo himself endeavored to wring the water out of his robe with his trunk. Even without any trappings or jewels at all. You'd stand out in any company. There's nobody bigger or handsomer than you, Kabumpo. Know it." Ha! The Elegant Elephant let go his robe and gave Randy a quick embrace. "Then what are we waiting for, little bragger wagger?" Tossing the young monarch lightly over his shoulder, the Elegant Elephant started after the Thunder Colt, moving almost as smoothly and silently as Thun himself. Without one look behind, Thun had disappeared into a green forest. And how cool and delicious it seemed to Randy and Kabumpo after the dry desert lands they had been traversing. Flashing in and out between the tall trees, the Thunder Colt led them to an ancient oak, set by itself in a little clearing. Here, leaning thoughtfully against the bole of the tree, stood the little Princess of Anuther Planet. Kabumpo, recognizing royalty at once when he saw it, lifted his trunk in a grave and dignified salute. Randy bowed, but in such a daze of surprise and admiration he scarcely knew he was bowing. The small figure under the oak was strange and beautiful beyond description, giving an impression both of strength and delicacy. Planetty was fashioned of tiny meshed links, fine as the chain mail worn by medieval knights, of a metal that resembled silver, but which at the same time was iridescent and sparkling as glass. Yet the Princess of Anuther Planet was live and soft as Randy's own flesh and bone self. Her eyes were clear and yellow like Thun's. Her hair, a cascade of gossamer net, sprayed out over her shoulders and fell halfway to her feet. Planetty's garments, trim and shaped to her figure, were of some veil like net, and floating from her shoulders was a cloak of larger meshed metal thread almost like a fisherman's net. Highnesses, Highness, oh very high Highnesses, prancing lightly before her, Thun pulled his announcement importantly into the air. "Here you see Kabumpty, Negligent Nelephant of Noz, and Sandy, King of Segalia." "Oh my goodness, he has us all mixed up," worried Randy in a whispered aside to Kabumpo, whose ears had gone straight back at the dreadful name Thun had fastened upon him. "Never mind, I am too mixed up. Everything down here is too perfectly lettling." "Oh, you can speak?" Leaning forward, Randy gazed delightedly down at the little metal maiden. He had been afraid at first she would use the same sky writing talk as Thumb. "But surely," smiled Planetty, each word striking the air with the distinctness of Silver Bell, so that Randy was almost as interested in the tune as in the sense. "Only the creature folk on Anuther Planet are without power of speech or sound making. They must go soft and silently. That is the Lenneth Law." "And a good law, too," observed Kabumpo, looking resentfully up at Thunder Colt's fading message. "Permit me to introduce myself again. Your Highness, I am Kabumpo, Elegant Elephant of Oz, and this is Randy, King of Regalia, which is also in Oz." "Oz?" marveled Planetty, lifting her spear like silver staff, whose tip, ending in three metal links, fascinated Randy. "Is this, then, the planet of Oz? And what are those, and these, and this?" In rapid succession, the little Princess touched a cluster of violets growing round the base of the oak, a moss covered rock, and the tall tree itself. "Why, flowers, rocks, and a tree," laughed Randy. "Surely you must have flowers, trees, and rocks on Anuther Planet." No, no, nothing like this. All these colors and shapes. Everything on my planet is flat and grayling." The metal maiden raised her hands, as she searched for the right words to explain another planet. "It is all so different with us," she confessed, dropping her arms to her side. "Yonder we have zonitors, not trees, but tall shafts of metal to which we fasten our nets when we sleep or rest. Underfoot we have network of various sizes and thicknesses with here and there sprays of vanadium. In our vanadium springs we freshen and renew ourselves, and without them we stiffen and cease to move." With one finger pressed to his forehead, Randy tried to visualize Planetty's strange grayling world, but Kabumpo, ever more practical, inquired sharply: "And how often must you refresh and renew yourself, Princess?" "Every sonsster in the Erling," answered the Princess with a bright nod. Thun, tiring of a conversation he could not hear, had cantered off to investigate a rabbit, and Randy, sliding to the ground, came over to stand nearer to the strange little Princess. "Kabumpo, and I do not understand all these words," he told her gently. "Sonester, Erling, what do they mean?" "Why, a sonester," trilled Planetty, throwing back her head and showing all of her tiny silver teeth, "is one dark, one light, 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 and Erling is when you waken from ret." "Help!" shuddered Kabumpo, shaking his ears as if he had been a bee in them. "I know what she means," crooned Randy, snapping his fingers gleefully. "A sonester on another planet is the same as a week here. All those lights and darks are days, and Erling is the morning and ret is rest." "Then you do realize," worried Kabumpo, as Planetty looked questioningly from one to the other, "that if this little lady and her colt are separated from their vanadium springs for a week, they will become stiff, motionless statues, and that—" the Elegant Elephant looked the pretty little Princess first up and then down—"that would be a great pity. We must help them back to Anuther Planet as soon as we can, my boy." "Yes, yes, that is what you must do." Planetty clapped her small silvery hands and blew a kiss to the elephant. "If Thun had just not jumped on that thunderbolt." "Jumped on a thunderbolt, did he?" A reluctant admiration crept into Kabumpo's voice. The Princess nodded so emphatically her long, lovely hair danced and shimmered round her face like a cloud shot with starlight. "You see," she went on gravely, "we were on our way to a Zero Dell." Kabumpo and Randy exchanged startled glances, but realizing there would be many odd words in Planetty's language, did not interrupt her. "And half way there," continued Planetty calmly, "a dreadful storm overtook us. A bright flash of lightning frightened Thun, and though I signaled for him to stop, he sprang right up on a huge glowing thunderbolt that had fallen across the netway, and it fell and fell and fell, bringing us to where we are now." "Well, that's one way of going places," commented Kabumpo, swinging his trunk from side to side. "But how can we find Anuther Planet when none of us fly?" demanded Randy anxiously. "It must be miles above this country, For think how fast and far thunderbolts fall when they fall." "Now you've forgotten the red gin," boomed Kabumpo, winking meaningly at the young King, for at Randy's words the little Princess had covered her face with her hands and three yellow jewels had trickled through her fingers. "Jinnicky can help Planetty and Thun go any place they wish," insisted Kabumpo in his loud, challenging bass. "Come, Princess, summon your fire-breathing steed, and we will travel on to the most powerful wizard in Ev." "Ev? Wizard? How gay it all sounds!" Planetty's voice rang out merrily as Christmas bells. With a lively skip she tapped her staff 3 times on the ground, and Thun, though out of sight, came instantly bounding back to his little mistress. Vaulting easily upon his back, the Princess of Anuther Planet lifted her staff, and Kabumpo, picking up Randy, started away like a whole conquering army. End of chapter 7.